to the Dole Institute of Politics. My name is Jacob McCarty, and I am a junior studying political science, public administration, and leadership studies. This is my second year as a discussion group coordinator. My time at the Dole Institute has been enjoyable. One of my favorite experiences I have had was a fully funded trip to Chicago for a policy challenge Super Bowl. The Dole Institute of Politics strives to promote a new era of leadership that uses politics to bring people together through opportunities that emphasize bipartisan cooperation, public service, and civic education and engagement, all of which is inspired by the leadership and service of Senator Bob and Elizabeth Dole and the enduring civic contributions of the greatest generation. The Student Advisory Board is an integral part of this mission, providing members with experiential learning and job opportunities, access to financial assistance, and networking opportunities with our special guests. If you are a student here at KU and would like to join, please email us at dolesab@ku.edu or speak with a student worker after the program. Before we begin, there are a few reminders I'd like to take a moment to share with you. Following tonight's program, a video recording will be available to stream on demand on our YouTube channel, where you can access a full catalog of our past programming. A loop hearing system is available to use if you have a T-coil aid. The Institute also has a limited number of listening devices. If you have questions about the loop system or at any time have difficulty hearing, please alert one of our staff members. Please take a moment to familiarize yourself with the marked exits in the room. In the event of an emergency, please make sure you're your way to the nearest marked exit. Please follow the instructions of staff members and exit the building if necessary. Following tonight's interview, a limited number of audience questions will be answered. If you are a part of our virtual audience, you can submit questions via email at dolequestions@ku.edu. The Dole Institute aims to foster civil and respectful discussion around often important and often difficult topics. Please phrase your questions with this in mind. Finally, I'd like to remind you to please silence your cell phones or place them in Do Not Disturb. Now please join me in welcoming Dole Fellow Joni Wickham.
Thank you all so much for being here. Really appreciate your time and attention to today's discussion group and our amazing guest that I'm going to introduce you to in just a second. If you were able to join us a couple of weeks ago, you know that I previously served as Chief of Staff to former Kansas City Mayor Sly James, and we left office in August of 2019, and we have a public affairs consulting firm now, and just delighted to be able to have an amazing array of clients, including Wendy at United We. We love to work with mission-driven clients and mission-driven organizations, and you're going to learn a lot about United We's mission and more about Wendy this afternoon during our time together. Just wanted to, again, elevate what Jacob mentioned about if you have any questions online, if you're joining us there. We love our virtual audience. We would love to take those at dolequestions@ku.edu. So enough of me. Let's talk about Wendy. As I mentioned, I've known Wendy for a long time. We're going to talk a little bit about our very first interaction this afternoon. But first, you should know that Wendy Doyle fearlessly advocates for women's economic and civic advancement by amplifying women's voices and producing results. She's going to tell you a lot about those results later today. Wendy is at the forefront of all economic policies that impact women and their families. She regularly educates and informs decision makers and community leaders about policy solutions for women at local, county, and state levels. Translating information into action, she testifies frequently to state legislatures, publishes op-eds in state newspapers, serves as a dynamic and informative presenter, and champions systemic policy change for governments and corporations through her thought leadership. During her 10-year tenure at United We, I cannot believe it's been 10 years, Wendy has led the organization to invest in research, advocacy, and policy solutions to remove economic barriers for women. After releasing research on women's issues in Missouri, right next door, Lieutenant Governor Mike Kehoe invited Wendy to be part of the Early Childhood Steering Committee. So we're going to talk a bit today about why childcare and reducing barriers to childcare is so important to all states' economy. In 2023, Wendy was awarded the Lieutenant Governor's Women of Achievement Award, which recognizes and honors the diverse accomplishments of women across the state in conjunction with Women's History Month. Wendy earned a BA from Rockhurst University in Kansas City, Missouri, and received the 2020 Rockhurst University Rashford Lion Award for Leadership and Ethics. She was honored as a member of the 2023 class of women executives in Kansas City by Ingram's Magazine, recognized in 2021 as an Idealist of the Year by City Year, and also inducted into the Missouri Public Affairs Hall of Fame in October 2021. That's a lot. My goodness. So, Wendy, when our audience looks at United We's website, and I highly encourage you to do so, lots of great research studies there, they will see that United We is a think and do tank. I love that. Tell me a little bit about what that means in actuality.
Thank you for having me, and it's such an honor to be with you all today and to be here at the Dole Institute. Your question of think and do tank, we are, first of all, a nonpartisan organization. I think that's very important, and a nonprofit organization. But the think and the do part of our work is, we invest significantly in evidence-based research. And we certainly have a wonderful partnership with the University of Kansas that's done multiple research studies we've commissioned together. But the research is really the evidence and gives us the data to be able to identify some real solutions. And for us, the do part is, it's not enough to identify what the barriers are, it's really working to get a solution. So the do part is coming up with ideas, innovative ideas to maybe solve what a particular barrier is. We are focused on economic development for women and their families, and civic leadership. So then we roll up our sleeves and get to work, and results are really important to us. So research, solutions, results is really part of our mantra at United We as a think and do tank.
That's great. So we've got some students in the audience. Some of them may be taking research methods or mixed methods classes. I can remember those from my master's degree program. Talk a little bit about your research framework, and in particular the fact that you do use those mixed methods. You engage in qualitative research and quantitative research. Why is it that you use that approach, and how does that approach help you solve policy issues?
So the qualitative works really well, and I would say United We, when we first started our research practice for the organization, we really just focused on the quantitative research. And having the data, the facts was really important. But as we really started in the policy space, it quickly became clear that we needed to have additional evidence of what constituents for specific districts were experiencing. So that's when we really leaned into the quantitative part of our research. And I'll give a specific example. One of our first research studies that we actually did was with the University of Kansas, and we did a both quantitative and qualitative, looking at the barriers for women's civic leadership, civic engagement. That research was so important, both quantitatively, but what really brought it to life is hearing the stories and what the barriers are for women to engage civically. So as a result of having that really helped us create more of a creative solution, which ultimately was the Appointments Project, which really led to our relationship with Joni and former Mayor Sly James. But that's a perfect example of the why it's so important. I think the stories have really been, through the qualitative gathering, has really helped us as an organization prioritize what the critical issues are at that moment in time. We may think we understand by looking at what the data is telling us, but once we hear and have, a mass of collective, stories that we've gathered or heard, it's evidence to really prioritize where we can best focus as an organization to get results. So the qualitative part is the most important thing from our perspective. And I'll give another example. Coming out of the pandemic, we had just completed an update to, we'll talk a little later about the Status of Women in Kansas research report that we commissioned here with University of Kansas. But it wasn't until we went out and started to do town halls around the state of Kansas did it really prioritize our issue areas, which really came out of that as childcare being the most significant barrier from an economic perspective, a workforce perspective, but really a barrier to especially women and their families. But that really was the evidence that we needed to kind of shift and refocus a little bit. But the town halls and the listening is the most important thing that we can do.
Yeah, it really does seem like when you're talking about public leadership and solving pressing public policy problems, that quantitative data is certainly important, but putting a face and a name to some of those policy issues helps move the needle a bit quicker.
Yes,
Yeah.
most definitely. I would say, especially hearing when we were in Topeka doing a town hall and gathering some stories and really testing what some of the issues were, a woman stood up and said that she had put her name on four different waiting lists at 4 different childcare providers, each requiring a $100 non-refundable deposit, so $400 out of pocket to be able to think about, getting a slot in a childcare, and got a call 4 years later. So I think we wouldn't have known had we not asked and heard and listened and heard.
That's a mortgage, just to have the opportunity to maybe be able to send your kid to childcare.
Yeah.
United We has worked with several researchers, Dr. Donna Ginther, here at KU researcher being one of them, to produce the status of women in Kansas. Tell the audience a little bit about that research report and the findings, and in particular, did any of the findings surprise you?
The Status of Women report was the most significant thing to really start our practice in Kansas that we did. And as an organization, we've committed to updating that research report every 3 to 5 years to really identify, are we making progress? Our North Star at our organization is labor force participation of women, so we really want to understand what are the barriers, and we really narrowed, working with the university on narrowing what those key indicators are, which include education, healthcare, childcare, employment opportunities, and certainly our aging population, but civic leadership as well. But the practice of going back and updating those indicators with new data points has been the most significant, part of our practice that we've done. And so it's a sad thing to say, but it yet is a small victory that we have moved the needle with the pay gap in the state of Kansas by a penny. Closing the gap between women and men, getting paid for the same job for the same work. But that is important for us as we continue to look at labor force participation. We know that if we do our job at United We right, we continue to invest in research and really move the needle on some policy systemic change, we can grow Kansas' economy by as much as 10 to 15%.
That's a lot. That's a lot of pennies.
That's a lot of pennies. But the fact that we're moving the needle, and granted that's collectively with a lot of rural parts of the state, but that's the importance and value of the Status of Women research report. And it really helped us launch and start to have creative conversations with policymakers just by educating them about this is the landscape that's in the state of Kansas focused on women. And it really helped inform and have a solid conversation with the policymaker. So a great research tool for us to really start to introduce the organization and work on some policy change.
So after the Status of Women in Kansas, the quantitative piece of this research layer, you then engaged in town halls all across Kansas. You mentioned that Kansas is a very diverse state. We've got urban areas here, suburban areas, rural areas. Talk a little bit about those town halls and what you heard from women. Were there any trends that it was like wherever you go, oh my gosh, everyone wants to talk about XYZ?
We wanted as an organization to commit to giving, accessibility to as many women as possible. So both urban and rural, as you identified, and then an opportunity to do kind of a statewide collective virtually, much like this opportunity today. But we really used the Status of Women research report and those key indicators that we identified to have informed conversations. I think what we learned again is prioritizing that childcare is the most significant barrier. A key point from our Status of Women in Kansas research report is childcare in the state of Kansas is equivalent, if not more, than in-state college tuition in the state of Kansas on an annual basis, especially for infant care. And it's really put families in a position to have to choose and have a kitchen table conversation between, is it work or family, and who is the breadwinner and who stays home with the children, because it is far and few between that there are resources available. So lack of childcare really elevated to the very top. I thought it was interesting about the healthcare space. You know, the healthcare in Kansas, especially in rural communities, it's, waning away and resources are becoming extremely limited. So there was a lot of discussion about accessibility to healthcare. When pressed women to think about taking care of themselves, they would always prioritize their children. So they were the last ones to seek healthcare if they needed it. Preventative healthcare exams were completely low on the list. And if there was one priority in preventative health care that women were prioritizing, I remember distinctly a woman in Topeka who was probably in the lower income category said, I only go to my eye exam on an annual basis because I need to be able to see my children. And that's a sad state of affairs. But we certainly got into, through these discussions too, about broadband access and certainly, really pressing around telehealth as an opportunity. Coming out of the pandemic and during the pandemic, we had the experience of telehealth was covered by insurance, which is not anymore, but is a tool in our rural communities to be able to access health care. So we as an organization continue to prioritize and press and have conversations around, broadband access has come a long way, especially with the ARPA funding that the state received, but it's not enough. And there's still interruption in service. Surprisingly too, coming out of the Status Women report, a lot of women are sitting on some great entrepreneurial ideas. So the idea of entrepreneurship is a lot of women are thinking about it and are sitting on some great ideas. What's holding them back, obviously, is execution. Broadband being one. A lot think about, perhaps having, part of an Etsy online opportunity. So access to internet seems to be a continued barrier, but always capital. And surprisingly, we pressed about capital and knowing how to navigate that world and knowing how men are really skilled at having conversations with financial institutions. We really pressed women. They don't have a clue or have a relationship with someone in their bank. So we asked that question of, do you know who your banker is? No. And now the whole banking world has become more virtual and, a whole different world. But that was an interesting point, certainly. We were comprehensive too, I think, just another key point of including the immigrant communities, especially in rural parts of Kansas. We offered interpreters. We offered childcare on site at every town hall that we hosted, with a lot of women taking advantage of that as well. So we wanted to reduce as many barriers as possible to get that collective information that we needed.
Speaking of barriers, we have to dig into the issue of childcare. Whenever you have talked about childcare so far, I see so many faces and so many reactions. People cannot believe, number one, how expensive it is and what an issue it is to labor force participation. So we know that the problem is massive. It can feel at times as though progress has been slow, but what do you think about the tangible solutions that have been felt in that childcare space, and where do you see it going in the future?
There's been a lot of great work done specifically in Kansas, but I think I'll start by just really citing, we put an op-ed out a few weeks ago, just the U.S. Department of Labor came out with the labor force participation statistics around women, and since January through the month of June, 200,000 women had dropped out of the workforce. There's a lot of variables as to the why, one being the flexibility in the workplace has kind of gone away with requirement to be back in the office. So that really put some pressure on families. But certainly the childcare accessibility, the cost, we talked about the waiting lists, there aren't enough slots for the need for childcare. And there are childcare deserts throughout the state of Kansas, especially in rural parts of our community. One of the issues and the small piece, childcare is an issue that's a mile wide. We certainly are excited about what New Mexico has come out with of universal childcare as a model, but keep in mind that's a state that has been, spending years working up to being able to do the universal childcare. Kansas is making, great strides. We're really proud that we testified this year, and we're really supportive of the creation of an Office of Early Childhood in the state of Kansas. We're hoping that that will inspire some innovation, some creativity, but yet some uniformity and some centralization of some of the key issues around childcare. What United We has especially leaned into, again, with a great partnership and research study with University of Kansas, Dr. Misty Hegenes led the effort on this research study, and we really looked and leaned into the licensing regulation at the city and the county level, and how there are significant barriers at all levels of government, including lots of confusion at the state level as well. So there is a lot, the child care is a mile wide of how and what the key issues are, from workforce to accessibility to the business model to the workforce not having a livable wage, let alone health care for our child care workers. Yet $800 billion is invested in, $800 million is invested in our public education system, with about an average of $14,000 per child in the United States, and about $1,500 per child for childcare with public assistance. So there's a gap. And there's a lot of discussions. Every state, this is a challenge, and they're working on it, with the exception of New Mexico has a stellar model. But it's a challenge. But I would say, the takeaway here, really proud of the bipartisan support of the child care issue in our state capital. This Office of Childhood Creation was a big child care piece of legislation that had a lot of things in it, but two women on both sides of the aisle led the effort, sponsored the bill, with a woman governor signing it. So we couldn't have been more excited and proud about the progress that signals in itself. But a lot of work to do, but a lot of progress that Kansas has made.
That's right. Kind of feels like a full circle moment a little bit with all the women involved in that process, for sure. Connecting the dots between two issues you've talked a bit about today, childcare being one of them and women's entrepreneurship being the other. Do you see any connectivity in women opening their own businesses because they need that flexibility because of where we are with childcare?
That was a key point we pressed on during the town halls in Kansas. So we were asking that question of the why. There's a lot of women are thinking about starting a business or entrepreneurship, and really pressing the why. And a lot of the women said that exact thing. I need flexibility. I'm working 8 to 5, but I need to be able to care for my children. We don't have childcare, and that certainly was an issue that really surfaced through the town hall setting. But we did a national research study looking at that very issue, and we surveyed women all across the country. We even put a national commission on women's entrepreneurship and childcare together in the last couple of years, and convened these experts and leaders with entrepreneurs, women entrepreneurs, and did a national survey all across the country and really asked that question. Surprisingly, a lot of women have started new businesses that have children age 6 and under. So again, meeting that point of needing flexibility in childcare. But when pressed about childcare as a woman entrepreneur, the needs are significant, and where they're going for resources are family and friends. Because as an entrepreneur, it's a 24/7, it can be a 24/7 business that doesn't stop from Monday through Friday. The work continues as you're launching or starting or maintaining a business. So when pressed of where do you go for consistent childcare, it's family and friends. And there's often that after hours needs, as we're hearing from a lot of our workforce. The needs for childcare doesn't stop at 5 p.m. The needs for childcare, if you have a night shift, start at 5, not end at 5. So still a lot of work to do around the childcare space. But the entrepreneurship question, I think women are really driving toward that, thinking about launching the business because the need of flexibility in childcare.
It's really interesting how those two really big issues interact, really is. So way back in 2014, we were still at City Hall under Mayor Sly James's leadership, and we kept finding that when we went to boards and commissions meeting, they were all full of older white gentlemen. I love older white gentlemen. I've married a couple of them, but that is not what our community looked like. And so Wendy had been in her role at United We for, was it 3 weeks? Gave her a call and said, hey, so we have a problem that we have to solve. We might need your help. What would you think about creating a project that helped get more women appointed to municipal boards and commissions? And 10 years later, the Appointments Project is still very much alive and doing well. And it has been really interesting to watch these women who started out being appointed in Kansas City, Missouri, are now running for office, helping other women run for office or think through their own civic leadership journey. So Wendy, bring us back to present day.
Yep.
Where is the Appointments Project now? And why do you feel like that appointed role is so important for civic engagement and democracy?
So the Appointments Project has been just a signature program and an award-winning program for United We. Again, based on a stellar research study that University of Kansas did for us, and we've done a couple of research studies around appointments with KU. The Appointments Project today has been in over 35 cities across the country. Started in the city of Kansas City, Missouri. We piloted with Joni and Mayor James to really learn. We weren't really sure where this was going to go, but has spread across the country, and we have had success of the women who have notified us of over 250 women have been appointed to a board or a commission at the city, county, or state level. So we're seeing progress made, but I think what is most exciting is, the vision of the Appointments Project after we had done the research is really to take the mystery about how to approach seeking something like that. And the research told us that women don't think about that when they have extra time to give. They aren't thinking, oh, my city, my county, my state. They're thinking more about a nonprofit, my children's school, my house of worship. And so this was really to educate and take the mystery out about how to navigate and approach that work. But the intervention was really to your point of, if we do our job right at United We educate elected officials, we get more women appointed to boards and commissions, that maybe women may want to go on and run for elected office, which would then change the conversation about the key issues that we are advocating for. So that was really the vision, and it has worked. We have seen some women who, through our training program that is complimentary, we don't charge a fee because we want to take barriers off the table to educate women about how to navigate the process, and then we serve as a resource all the way through to the appointment. But we also want to educate the elected official about the value and importance of representation, to have new voices and faces at the table to make the best decisions for everyone. So the Appointments Project has really evolved. We then have done a research study with University of Kansas on really doing a landscape of the municipal boards and commissions across the state of Kansas. And what we found is our rural communities are more diverse with representation than our metropolitan communities in the state of Kansas, which is a little bit of a surprise. We've talked a lot about what came out of that research report. We've really coined the phrase of power boards through our research as being those boards where decisions are made about finance, about economic development, about money in communities, and sorely lacking women's representation. We know that economic development boards and commissions are really the springboard for future candidates, whether it be women or men. So a lot that you see move up into county commission or city council have come out of the economic development. We see where women have really navigated, in the report showed in Kansas, the library boards, the parks and recreation boards are really full of women. So you would think that logically, that's where women would navigate. So where we really are trying to lean into are those boards that are making those powerful decisions locally, the boards and commissions, or the economic development, the tax increment financing board. That's where we want to see more women, and we're trying to lead women to that path forward. And it's not just enough to get one woman appointed. It's really the importance of having two women at the same table to support one another in those meetings. So that's the vision.
It's so interesting too, you're reading my mind, because I was going to bring up that point about having more than one woman appointed to a particular board. But I've also seen firsthand that when you have a woman on a board, the women who are on the staff that staff those boards, develop the reports from the boards, they also feel more empowered to bring solutions to the women and men who are serving on those boards and commissions. So it's a multi-factorial way to empower different people, for sure.
Fantastic.
Yeah. Let's talk about occupational licensing. Raise your hand, the people who are in the audience, if you have ever heard the term occupational licensing before. So this is a fairly nuanced topic. Tell me why United We has put so much focus on the issue of occupational licensing, and then maybe give us an example of a profession that has an occupational license.
This really came out as an issue for us to focus on as an organization. One, connects back to Appointments Project, because a lot of the appointments at the state level have oversight of professional professions like healing arts or the dentistry or whatever it may be. So it connects back to Appointments Project. But we also, through some data and research, identified that women hold a professional license to do their work at 3 times the rate that men do. So a teacher, an architect, an attorney, a medical doctor, you need a license to do your work. And we really identified that there weren't a lot of organizations talking about it or really researching it or working in that space. Yet, this is a barrier for women in the workplace. It's especially difficult if you move across state lines. If you move across the state of Kansas, some of the licenses may not really transfer to a municipal level. So this really opened up, an opportunity for United We, and we've been working on this, really chipping away at almost every legislative session. In Kansas, it was especially interesting in the cosmetology field. Believe it or not, there are layers and layers within that industry. We have been successful deregulating eyebrow threading. Took us a little bit to understand that if we haven't had your eyebrows threaded. But you don't need to go through cosmetology school to be able to do it. There's not a health safety risk. So we're really leaning into understanding what the key issues are. Every session we're working, and especially as our footprint has expanded a little further out from Missouri, Kansas, we see opportunity to develop compact licensing opportunities. If you are an occupational therapist in Kansas, you may be doing work in Oklahoma or Arkansas, and we see that could be a role that United We fills. We have been gratefully awarded, we're grateful to be awarded from the Ewing Marion Kauffman Foundation an investment to do our next big national research study on this topic. We've just launched the research project. It'll be a couple years before it's finalized, but we're going to be doing a national landscape to further understand and get a better understanding about this for women. And then we're going to take a special deeper dive in Kansas, Missouri, Oklahoma, and Arkansas. So stay tuned on more research that we'll be doing that is including qualitative gatherings. So we're excited about that. But occupational licensing, there aren't a lot of organizations that are working on it, which is the why for us, but a significant barrier for entrepreneurship, but women in the workplace. And we want people to move to Kansas and work.
That's right. So we've got occupational licensing reform, we've got civic leadership through the Appointments Project, childcare, women's entrepreneurship. That's a wide variety of policy issues, which requires you, I would imagine, to work with a wide variety of stakeholders. And you must be doing something right because you're getting a lot of successes and a lot of policy wins. How do you bring all of those different stakeholders together to work on these varied issues?
I think the key conduit of all the stakeholders is the research. It really pulls people together to have an informed conversation. We work really hard at the relationship building perspective, whether it be hearing from women. We want to have a relationship and understand. We want that feedback loop consistently, but we also need the relationship with the decision maker. So whether it be in the corporate setting or in our state capital or at the city level, we need the relationships, but the conduit always is bringing the conversation back to the research. That really has served us well to be able to make the progress that we have.
Right. And you're celebrating at United We your 35th anniversary.
35th anniversary,
okay.
For sure, for
So,
the organization.
That's amazing. So if we have any country music fans in here, I want to quote Tim McGraw, one of my favorites. Tell us what you're going to be doing in your next 30 years.
Research, solutions, results.
If it ain't broke, don't fix it, right?
Right, for sure. We've made significant progress, but it does feel like, on days where we've made 10 steps forward, but also 10 steps backward. Women have come a long way in our history, but we have a long way to go. We have 29% of our Congress representative of women. We've never had a woman president. We have lots of opportunity to still grow. A lot of our states have never even had a woman governor, and a lot of our county commissions in the state of Kansas have never had a woman. So there's lots of opportunity. There's a lot of work still to do. Women's labor force participation is as important now than ever. We've, with 200,000 women falling out just in this year, what's next year going to look like? So I think the mission is on point, and there's a lot of work for the next 30, 35 years.
For sure. I have one more question for Wendy, so please get your questions, whether you're here in the audience with us or if you're online, get your questions ready for her. And my last question is one that I'm asking everyone who comes to our discussion series. You don't have to look very far in today's politics to see that civility is often missing from public discourse. That can have a damaging effect on civic engagement and participation in the democratic process. I do have a question, and it is public leadership, democratic participation, and civic participation still worth it, or has it gotten too messy?
Worth it and essential now more than ever. And I love this point about civility, because one of the issue areas that we've really identified as an organization through this work is the importance of diplomacy and civility. And we talk a lot about that. And again, we bring it back to having informed conversations, whether you agree or disagree. There are some data on the table for us to have an informed conversation. But we all need to choose where we feel comfortable participating. I think that's first and foremost an individual decision. But we all have the privilege and the right to vote, and not everyone in the world has that. And so I think at a bare minimum, we always encourage people, whether you want to participate or not, take time to inform yourself and show up on election day, that's really important work. We do hope we see different people jumping into running for office. We've had great discussions in our town halls about, barriers to women to do that, and I think it's a lot of what we all would know through the lack of civil discourse. Really is a barrier for good people to step forward and raise their hands. But I go back to, we had the privilege of hosting former United Nations Ambassador Samantha Power for one of our events. She's gone on and had an amazing career, regardless of policy. But when we hosted her as a speaker, she talked about this very point, and I often talk about a key story that she shared. She was on the National Security Council and showing up to have really robust conversations, and the discussion and the disagreement really became in those meetings with other women. And so what she created was what she called the Wednesday group. And every Wednesday, she would invite her fellow colleagues that would be sitting around the national security table to her office. And at 4 o'clock, they would meet and they would get a few drinks out. And they started to get to know one another on a personal level. They didn't talk about work, but they talked about families, friends, what their interests were, hobbies outside of sitting around the national security table. And what they found as a result of getting to know one another, when they went into those robust and high discussion meetings, they walked away having debate and disagreement, but with great respect of one another. And I think the key missing point in today's world is we can disagree, but we're not taking enough time to get to know one another to walk away with respect. And I always think about that story that Samantha Power told, that we're missing. We listen, but we're not getting to know one another to really understand, and ending with respect.
Yeah, it's really hard to villainize someone if you know them on a human level and know them in a deeper way than just what their particular role is.
Yes.
That's a great point. So it is time for you all to talk now. We would love to take your questions. And if you are online, as a reminder, you can send your questions to dolequestions@ku.edu. We have amazing students who are going to be walking around with microphones. So if you have a question and you're in the audience, please raise your hand and we will have a student come to you with a microphone so we can all hear you. And keep in mind, as we've just wrapped up our discussion with Wendy talking about civility, that the Dole Institute is all about talking about sometimes difficult issues, but in a way that helps us all develop a shared understanding and with a civil tone. So who has a question? Yes, thank you.
Hello, Wendy.
We've got a
Right.
microphone right here.
Thank you. Women have made significant progress in a number of areas over the last several decades, and now there are more women in medical schools and law schools. There are more women-owned businesses, so there have been a lot of progress, but there are a lot of gaps too. It seems to me, though, that there is an increasing backlash against this, particularly as the source of the problems that young men are having. What is your perspective on that, and what might be a counterpoint to that?
That's a great question, Mike. You know, we are just in an unusual time. And, you know, and I'm going to bring this back to, you know, how our organization, you know, coming into this year with the newer administration and all of the changes that we've seen around diversity, equity, and inclusion, you know, the word woman was on the list of not so great words to be used, you know, in today's world. And I think about that from, you know, a woman in the medical school, woman starting out, you know, and our work and the conversations that we're having. And we've really navigated this by just head down, moving forward, and really not making it an issue. But we understand on an individual level, we know that that's, you know, extremely difficult, whatever the setting may be. But I think I'm going to bring us also back to the labor force participation drop-off of women to the point. I mean, there's a lot of variables that are really pushing women out of the workforce, which could be a lot about what you described too. And, you know, women are really questioning, you know, I think through our town halls, their value, their purpose, what's important to them, and what they want to do with their life and moving forward. So I know there's a lot of difficulty with the young men. We're just, as an organization, trying to head down, moving forward.
One thing that I appreciate so much about United We's mission is that I think there's a very important role in United We to play in switching this deficit mindset that if I get something, it's going to negatively impact you. Switching that to a more of an abundance mindset where if I get something, oh my gosh, guess what? Perhaps it's the all boats can rise type of framework. So I appreciate the research and the work that United We does, because I think it'll get us further into understanding that if more women are able to participate in the workforce to the extent that they desire, that's actually helpful for the whole state's economy.
I think our nonpartisanship as an organization has really served us well, and the issues that we're focused on have great bipartisan support, both women and men, which has for this moment in time, we couldn't have.
It's unique.
It is unique for us, for sure. Thank you for the good question, Mike.
Yes.
So I'm hoping that you might shed some more light on the decision-making that happens when women drop out of the workforce. If any of the research you've done has illuminated the calculus that they're making, having come from financial services before, working in disability insurance and some of these areas, what we saw that was concerning is women making a very straight mathematical, am I making more money than childcare costs decision, and not factoring in retirement, and not factoring in health benefits, and not factoring in the possibility they might become single or be primary breadwinners down the road if a spouse or partner loses a job. And that calculus was missing for most people, that was really having negative economic effects on them as a family and in their community. Are you seeing any illumination on that?
We aren't seeing a lot of data on that yet, but we know that that's going to be coming just with a significant impact, that we saw the numbers in June. But the compounding effect is something that we talk about a lot, that's really not being fit into the decision making, because the decision making that we're seeing is the most immediate of, I don't have childcare. And you saw a significant drop off in June this year, which school's out. So there was summer school, or money for summer camp, or, accessibility to that. So it really you saw a huge cliff, women dropping off in the month of June because school's out. But the compounding effect of what's my, I'm going to outlive my spouse. Women live longer than men. I'm not contributing to retirement or Social Security. What's my health care benefit plan going to look like? That is not being fit in the equation. What we're seeing is the most immediate that's in front of people, unfortunately.
Good question. What other questions do we have? Yes, thank you.
I guess this is a little bit of a comment as well as a question. So when the gentleman in front of me was talking about the strides that we've made and the number of women in various professions, how great that is, we still have this problem. I worked in education and childcare, an area that I'm really have strong feelings for. And the problem is that we haven't done the work of elevating the professions, and I call them professions, that many women actually go into. And it's sort of like, it's great that we have more women lawyers. It's great we have more women engineers. But what about those nurses, those childcare providers, those educators? How do we elevate those professions that have traditionally brought women, which then also ends up being low-paid professions? So.
Yeah. It's a great point. It's a great point, and there's been a lot of discussion across the country about how to change the narrative around childcare, and childcare workers, and it's not babysitting, it's early education, it is important, hard work, but yet not even making a livable wage, and that's, put a lot of stress, certainly during the pandemic, coming out of the pandemic, and now here we are with, I can go make a lot more money at the Home Depot and I could get, healthcare benefits for myself and my family. So we know the people that are doing that great work are doing it for the love of children and doing it for the right reason. We need more of that. But there has been a lot of discussion about changing just within the college and university setting about talking, it's not a babysitter, it's early education, it's important work to try to recruit more people into that field. So to your point, we've made some progress, there's discussions about changing the narrative, but we've got a lot of work to do, for sure. It's a really good point.
Yes, thank you, in the front row. Thanks, Jacob.
Hi, Wendy. Question for you regarding the cutbacks of Trump, and how has that or have you seen any effect of that yet? And what do you think is in the future?
Well, there's certainly been the federal funding cuts across the board to, our organization. We don't receive any federal funding, so for us as an organization, we haven't felt that, but across a lot of industries, there's obviously been an impact. I think with what we're waiting to see is this impact with the big, beautiful bill, and the impact that that's going to have on the healthcare system. I think we all should be paying attention to that's, we talked about our rural communities are already, stressed. Think about how the impact to Medicaid, to Medicare, and our healthcare system. I think we aren't even prepared to know what that's going to look like. So I think all states are, bracing to prepare for what the budget process will look like next legislative session.
Who else has a question for Wendy today? Anybody? Yes, sir.
Who do you see as your principal allies in this work?
Oh, that's a good question.
We have great bipartisan support, and again, our issues are economic development issues that impact, obviously, women, but also impact men too. So it's been, very friendly conversation on both sides of the aisle. And we've had a lot of corporate leaders who've been supportive of our work too, that find value in the research or they want better understanding. So we think that's a good sign. Again, we really bring it back to the research, having that informed conversation. But both women and men have been really supportive of our work, which is why our name is United We. Bringing both women and men together is, kind of the objective for us, because we know women alone can't solve this problem. We need everyone together, working together. But both sides of the aisle have been extremely supportive. Most of our governors in the 4 states where we're working, extremely supportive. Governor Kelly's been, extraordinary, a supporter of our work in what we do. So we're blessed in that respect.
Yes.
So what does qualitative research look like outside of just those town halls? Are you working with other organizations or receiving responses and experiences from other populations in group settings, or just how does that work, I guess?
We see the value of partnership with our organization, and that's one way that we feel that we can make progress through partnerships. So we have in each state in Kansas, we have a Kansas Public Policy Coalition of other organizations, corporate, nonprofit associations, the chambers, so that we can do our best listening through those partnerships that we have. And we always ask, what are the critical issues that you're addressing or that you are hearing? And that's a great touch point for us, is through the partnership opportunities outside of the individual women that we are targeting. But we feel strongly in partnerships. It's a great question.
Yes, thank you.
I'm curious what you're most proud of in your 35 years at United We.
That's a good question.
That's a great question. I think a proud moment is always when you get a bill that you've worked on to the governor's desk and the governor signs it. That feels momentous and victorious for us. And one of the first pieces of legislation I'll cite in Kansas, we did was called the HEROES Act. It was called the HEROES Act. And it was a way for United We to really get introduced into the state capitol and to the policy space. And what this legislation called for is any veteran or first responder who was injured or they lost their life in the line of duty, they themselves or their family members are eligible for in-state college tuition, room and board, and books. And so it was super exciting because, that had great bipartisan support, but moved through the process very nicely, and one of our easiest pieces that we've worked on. And then the governor signed it. And so that was pretty exciting. But I think another, momentous moment, and I'm going to cite Missouri on this one, is the governor at the time was Eric Greitens, and we had shared a paid family leave policy brief with him and wanted him to think about creating a paid family leave policy for Missouri state workers. And he actually made a phone call. He called me and he said, we're going to do this. And he signed the first executive order in the country for a paid family leave policy for state employees in the state of Missouri of 6 weeks for the birth or adoption of a child for a primary caregiver in the state employee, and for a secondary caregiver, they were eligible for 3 weeks, which would mean if a partner or a spouse both worked for the government. And he signed that executive order, which was a proud moment, knowing that was the first in the country.
Trendsetter. Any other questions? Well, you all have been an amazing, amazing audience. Please give Wendy a round of applause. Thank you for being here. Our next discussion group is October 8th, same time, same place. We have State Representative Laura Williams, as well as Minority Leader Brandon Woodard. If you know them at all, you know that they are not of the same political party. They once ran against each other for the same elected office. One of them won, one of you lost. You'll have to come hear the discussion to figure out which was which. And guess what? They actually worked together on policy issues across the aisle. So I'm really excited for that one and hope you all can join that. Thank you so much for being here, and thank you, Wendy.
Thank you.
Yes.